Coogs House. The Houston Cougars continue to inch towards knowing who their point guard is slowly. But who's going to campus this weekend for the spring football game? Wait, spring football game?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came by, thank you for making a Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. If you're enjoying the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us, where do you think you can find the best chicken sandwich? Shouts to Kelvin Sampson on that one and whatever impact that had with Arkansas. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. More on that in a moment. But we got a lot of things to talk about here, including a look at the offense we're going to see this weekend at spring football. Yes, there's a spring football game this year happening this weekend. I believe it's on ESPN Plus and the whole nine. Everything going right in that. We're talking about the offense in that game. The running backs look to play a key role, so I'll make sure we have some time to talk about them and what that backfield group could look like as we lean on them fairly heavily both this Saturday and in Saturdays in the future. But first and foremost, we got to talk about point guards. Now, we've been looking a lot at the run it back aspect of this week of Houston Cougar recommitments of sorts, guys coming back from their COVID year and stuff. And before we get to like the big guy coming to campus this weekend, I do want to point out that Emmanuel Sharp officially said he is returning to also run it back per Landon Gosling. It looks like in hearing stuff online, Landon tweeted something to the extent of like, this was a much more dicey process for him. People want Houston Cougars on their rosters, and they kind of had to like re-recruit Emmanuel like they have to do with all of their guys because so many people want them in their programs. People want what Houston has. And in firing out some stuff, asking some people some questions, it sounds, frankly, like it really is very that kind of serious. Like starters in a program like Emmanuel Sharp this year are not necessarily guaranteed to come back in the way that we might have thought, even within the Houston Cougar culture. Now, things went the right way. Emmanuel is coming back. And the bigger question remains, now that Emmanuel is officially on board to come back, is what's going to happen at that point guard spot. The other four starting spots are all returning. Jalen Roberts, power forward, Javier Francis at the center spot, Sharp and Cryer in the backcourt, all coming back. Right. And so the point guard remains a question mark. People are waiting on Jamal Shedd's official answer. Signs continue to point towards the pros, but as we detailed yesterday, that might be a little up in the air depending on who he asks and talks to as far as what that future looks like. For what it's worth, I think he'll be a really, really good pro. If Jamal Shedd were to leave, Houston has heard from Sampson that Houston's going to have a good point guard next year. And we might have seen some light on, if it's not Jamal, who that might be, with an announcement about this weekend that Milos Uzan, I really hope I'm saying that right, heard said a bunch of different ways online from different commentators, but the point guard from the Oklahoma Sooners is coming to Houston as after entering the transfer portal for a visit. Uzan has started 56 games in his 2 seasons at Oklahoma, started every single game for them this year, has 2 years of eligibility remaining. Really, really impressive athlete, to say the least. He's an impressive athlete that plays point guard. I was really impressed in watching his year 1 to 2 stuff because that's me trying to project what he's going to look like from year 2 to 3, wherever he ends up. Listed at 6'4", listed 195 pounds, originally from Las Vegas, did some prep school kind of stuff, including Prolific Prep, which is like where Jalen Green and the Houston Rockets went, like a big-time prep basketball program. He's a true point guard in a lot of ways, like 9 points, 4.5 assists, 3.5 rebounds. He was all Big 12 freshman team as a freshman. Honestly, the Houston Cougars kind of stole a lot of the awards this year. He might have had a better shot at making one of the all Big 12 teams had they not been in the conference. But I think people look at like he's a pure point guard, and like, but he only had 4.5 assists per game this year. He started every game, was the point guard playing, the majority of the minutes. He played like 32 minutes a game this season. How does that add up? He averaged in like average per game exactly a fourth of the assists the entire Oklahoma team had. His low assist number at 4.5 assists per game is just lower than we're used to having at Houston with guys like Jamal, guys like Marcus, et cetera, Ladiki, whomever, right? But it's also worth pointing out that his assist number is really more indicative of a low assist Oklahoma offense, right? The way they move the ball around and puts guys in space to dribble and kind of create shots, not catch and shoot shots in the same kind of way, which honestly hurts his assist number. You also had J.V. McCollum there, who was a big-time basketball player for them last season, scored a lot of points, but he put the ball on the ground a lot, dribbled the ball a lot, and so that's going to kill those assist numbers some as well. In a qualitative sense, watching his sophomore year tape after watching his freshman year tape was interesting because, again, you see the kind of growth. Uh, as a sophomore, I thought he used his size really, really, really well, both around the rim and finishing and on the defensive side. 6'4", long-armed, 195 pounds, and again, a true point guard guy, right? Envisioning him potentially on the floor with Sharp and Cryer on the two wings, running the lanes for kickouts with, Francis run down the floor for a lob, and then he gets into a pick and roll kind of stuff with J1. J1 gets in the short roll, can create out of stuff. Like, there's all kinds of options this talented athlete brings to the table. For what it's worth, his height adds a lot. Height and wingspan add a lot to his game and transition on offense and defense because he's a bigger athlete, frankly, than a lot of point guards in college basketball, really. He shot 40% from three as a freshman on over 4.5 attempts per game, but shot 29.5% from three as a sophomore on 6.5 attempts per game. And I tried to figure out what was going on there besides an increased couple of attempts. It looks like to me, and stats analytics bear it out, he shot a lot more. I didn't see every game from both seasons, obviously, but a lot more catch and shoot threes as a sophomore. Again, Javen McCollum driving and dishing because he had the ball in his hands a lot. And frankly, he's not didn't appear to be very comfortable in catch shoot threes. Almost like it was like rushing him or something. Whereas shooting the ball off the dribble, which he did a lot more as a freshman, looks more comfortable, right? And so it's obviously getting more threes up as a sophomore too, I guess, but it's really kind of what types of threes he's getting up based on the offense they're running. I do think that catch and shoot threes, if you've got a decent form, and I think he does, you kind of can see guys develop over the course of time with more reps in the gym. Houston's got a bunch of great shooters, so maybe he gets away without it. But truthfully, I think just time spent on task there is something he can continue to get better at. And I do think that he's a good defender in the sense that people aren't going by him, right? He's not like getting beat to the basket or anything like that. But he doesn't have the turnovers forced statistics that Houston's point guards have had for the last half decade or so. Some of that I think is going to be a cultural switch when he comes to Houston, as far as like Houston's aggressive, they're going after the ball, right? The issue is the ball, and I think that you'll see a shift in that when he shows up to Houston as well. He is visiting this weekend, and it looks like he doesn't have a whole lot of visits set up either. I'd imagine that means that Houston's on a short list of schools that he could realistically end up at. I, again, would not kick this guy out of the gym. He can really play. He can really go and fits with a couple of scores around him differently than Shed did, but pretty darn well along the way. Interested to see how this comes together. Obviously, the formal Jamal Shed decision, whether it's pro or, dabble in the combine or whatever, all of that has a little bit of time to be figured out. He has until April 27th to formally declare he's going to be in the NBA draft process or not. And then even if he were to enter but maintain his eligibility, he has until May 29th to back out. So big window here to get stretched out here. I was somewhat anticipating, I'm being completely honest, kind of a rolling series of commitments. We had J1, and then we had LJ. Wednesdays was Manuel Sharp. So maybe Jamal happens on Thursday, or maybe it takes a little bit longer. He's got a little bit more options, different kinds of things happening. So we'll see. We'll see where all of that goes on the whole. But we'll be following each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. We appreciate you stopping by to listen to that as well. I want to talk some in the second segment about that football game happening on campus this weekend, Houston versus Houston. Who's going to be toting the rock and what that could look like. But first, if you're looking to get around Houston and go to anything, sports, theater, comedy, concerts, whatever you want to do, GameTime is the app you got to have to find the best prices on tickets. Now, they have all kinds of flash deals that you can save more on, exclusive in-app kind of things just based on the right, luck popping your way. Oh, I want to go see that. It might even give you an idea of something you didn't know was happening in town. They got zone deals and all-in pricing. So you can just say, I kind of want to sit in this section and roughly these couple of rows. You let them pick it for you. Average of 18% savings. And that saving is an all-in price, no hidden fees or anything. You can see what the seat view is going to look like before you hit buy. So exactly what your view is going to look like for that event at that venue. They got the lowest prices guaranteed. They'll refund you 110% of the difference in credit if you can find a seat in the same section and row for less. So make sure you go check out GameTime today. Download the GameTime app and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so I said that Houston's running back room is going to be important this year. And in yesterday's episode, we actually talked some about how the wide receivers might not have the football coming their way enough this season because of the kind of offense that we know Kevin Barbay wants to run, because of the kind of culture of an offense and defensive balance we know Fritz wants to be a part of and run. And I know this dates back to like the Case Keenum days or even the Kevin Cobb days, but I feel like we kind of associate Houston with these like high scoring offenses, and those are the good old days, or at least the post 2000 good old days, right? I think this year's program and the program in the next few years under Fritz, if Barbay's around the whole time, I guess, I shouldn't assume anything. But I'd imagine it looks a little bit more muckied up or a little dirtier or a little grimier, a lot more running of the football, right? That's just what's in Fritz's DNA. That's just what's in Nyagavi's DNA, the offensive line coach Nyagavi. That's just what's in Kevin Barbay's DNA, right? Now, I want to spend this segment talking some about the running back depth chart because it's interesting to see how it plays out. And then I was talking some of the offense in the third segment as well. But I do think it's worth pointing out that they've got a handful of running backs that I would be happy with all getting snaps this season. Parker Jenkins, Rashawn Stanford, Tony Mathis, and Stacey Sneed. You'll notice I left off Brandon Campbell because on Wednesday, Brandon Campbell did formally put his name in the transfer portal. Brandon did a great job of filling in a couple years ago with the Alden McCaskill injury. We kind of had a running back by committee. He's a bruiser. He's a tough running back. He's a tough runner. Honestly, I feel like he jumped in the transfer portal because snaps are going to be limited this year for him at Houston. I just mentioned 4 guys I feel very confident with handing the ball off to, and I didn't get to him, right? And so how he fit in that backfield would have been interesting to say the least. I also think it's going to be interesting to see how Stacey Sneed fits into this. Stacey's probably the guy I feel like is at the low end of the depth chart because of his running style versus what kinds of things Barbay and Nyagavi want to do. He's way better out of the backfield as a pass catcher. So I think he's going to be in the rotation because of that at all times. I could even see him, and I argued for this last season, and no one listened to me. I could even see him playing some slot at times. He has great hands, great speed. He's a great football player. Running back's a tough position. You got to find the right offense. I kind of think he's on the low end of the totem pole of this team for getting the carries, but I do think that he has a role because he is so good at catching the football out of the backfield. Right ahead of him on the depth chart to me is Tony Mathis. Tony is a leader, a locker room guy, a get right guy. Um, Everyone has great things to say about Tony, both at Houston and West Virginia. However, he's just kind of a straight line bruiser, didn't have the same kind of speed as the guys, especially as his three teammates I'm talking about here. And he needs to get downhill to get positive yardage fast. And so he's like an ISO guy or a goal line guy. Last year, it felt like they relied on him just kind of when they honestly, it felt like the team, and I'll just say this bluntly, it felt like last year's administration leaned heavily on guys' experience. And so he had a lot of experience, which put him in whatever roles, right? More experience coming in the guy I'm going to mention in a second, but B, I don't know that that's necessarily the MO of this staff in the same way, right? Tony's important. I think Tony's going to get tough yardage. He's going to get in there on 3rd and 1 and that kind of stuff, but that's kind of where I see his role being this year. I think Rashawn Stanford, you're going to like a lot. Electric speed, great footwork. Spent a year redshirting last year to kind of build his body up for the college running back position. High-end recruit, hometown kid. Going to really enjoy watching him play football. I will know more about his game and how it fits in exactly this week in the spring game. But I imagine that he, as high ranked recruit as he was, is going to be running with the twos. The starting running back, folks, and this is not just because if you've been following the show for a long time, you know he's one of my favorite players on the entire team. But starting running back is Parker Jenkins. At practices, he's getting mesh and running reps in like the quarterback running back handoff drills with Donovan Smith because Smith's not throwing. In first team offensive drills, he's getting out there with the first team, whether that's Zion or whomever, in both 9-on-7 run drills and passing drills. Parker Jenkins just moves a little bit differently on the football field. I said this like in Sam Houston State last year. His acceleration from the point of getting the handoff to the line of scrimmage is better than anyone Houston's had in a long time. And I'm including some of those guys that you're thinking of. But yes, Parker Jenkins' acceleration is incredible. What I thought was impressive as a freshman was how well he found holes while putting his foot on the gas and shifting gears like that throughout the season. He has a great great sense of when to shift up and down in gears. If we're going to continue to look at these guys like cars, right, where he's going to speed up and slow down, speed up and slow down, paces things well. Love watching him know when to bounce. A lot of young running backs want to bounce early. They want to get the edge and run fast. He times it up very well. I think we heard a lot last year about him maybe not blocking as well as Mathis or somebody else. It looks like to me Parker's gained some good weight. Parker Ainsworth probably gained bad weight. Parker Jenkins has gained good weight. And I feel like that honestly is going to probably increase his reps as well, just because he's not getting run over by college defensive linemen as a true freshman in the same kind of way. I think Parker Jenkins is the leader on this football team as a sophomore, as a true sophomore. And I frankly have been looking forward to him being a leader on this football team whenever it was going to happen, ever since that whole thing with Alton McCaskill went down. If you're new to the program, new to the school, don't remember when Alton McCaskill, after missing a year hurt, in which frankly fans did a great job of coming up and showing out and supporting him through injury. McCaskill entered the transfer portal and quickly committed to Colorado, and really, frankly, kind of shattered the glass for a lot of people about what the football transfer portal was going to look like for Houston in the spring of 23. As Houston's embarking into the Big 12, they're hoping to bring Alton with them, right? Decided not to join us. And Parker Jenkins tweeted something out to the effect of, I forget the tweet even said exactly now, but he was like, hey, I'm here at running back. We're going to be okay. And like the confidence, but not like it was confidence he displayed, but not like denigration of everything Alton did. Walked a great balance and line there in a way that, frankly, I was looking for out of a lot of senior leaders on the team. A lot of guys have been around for a long time, but were watching their buddy. They didn't want to talk bad about their buddy. Parker was just like, hey, we're going to be okay. I'm here now. Running back, I got it, right? like we'll be okay. And I think I just applauded that confidence. And then the fact that he can really play helps a lot too the whole time. And so I'm a big Parker Jenkins fan, but I'm excited to see him as the lead guy in this offense, an offense that we'll talk about schematically in a second is going to run the ball a lot. He's going to get a lot of carries, and I think that it looks like his body's ready for it. I know athletically his footwork and speed last year were ready for it, and so I'm really, really excited. Now, I've hinted at this offense being a little bit different looking for a while now, and so if you really want to get in the X's and O's, get a little dirty with it with me in a second, I want to do that. But first, it is spring football this weekend, but if you're looking at other sporting events that are more formal than spring football this weekend or whatever, it's time for like NBA playoffs about to dial up, NHL playoffs about to dial up, baseball's in full swing. FanDuel is your place to get in on every single game right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's $150, win or lose, but on everything from the slap shots to home runs, slam dunks, more, all on a single app that is safe, secure, and super, super easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, so now we kind of understand who the running backs are. I feel like I need to stress that this is going to be a football team that runs the ball a lot. As a head coach, last year, Tulane ran the ball 37 times per game. 37, right? That's more than half their plays on offense are running the football, right? That's almost unheard. You think about modern football, you think about passing and 7-on-7 and guys in shorts with flags on their no. These guys ran the football and ran it hard. Okay. And that's the year after Tajay Spears left, right? It wasn't just a personnel choice. They ran the football and ran it hard. Mississippi State, where Barbay, offensive coordinator, was as an offensive coordinator last year, ran the ball 33 and a half times. 33 and a half times per game they ran the football. It's kind of also the way college football is actually going, kind of quietly. Both teams, the Big 12 title game, ran for 32 plays a game. Michigan ran for over 32 plays a game. Michigan ran 37 and a half times a game. Alabama ran 40 times a game. Texas 36 and a half times per game. That's 3 of the 4 in the college football playoff, going for 36 or more rushes per game. Washington was an outlier at 27 and a half. Obviously, Michael Penix and the crazy speed they had at receivers changed that up some. They don't call it the West Coast offense for nothing, I guess. Right. That's somewhat of a joke for the X's and O's folks. Houston, comparatively, ran the ball 29 times per game last year. So we talked yesterday about how Houston was kind of in line with those guys, in terms of passing numbers last year, how many passes per game there were. And I felt like that might not be enough to get the ball to everyone based on what kind of offense Kevin is bringing in, Coach Barbay, the offensive coordinator. And that means it's not going to be successful. It just means I feel like our talents at wide receiver, we got a lot of talent there. Houston last year ran the ball just 29 times per game, and I feel like it's safe to say they're going to run it if they get up to their druthers, more like in the mid-30s this season. And I think that's kind of twofold. One, you see a lot of college football shifting. Good teams are running the ball more. They've always said good teams run the ball. You hear that all the time. Truthfully, the twofold aspect to that is, one, teams that are up at the end tend to win the game, right? That those statistics typically include teams that are up by multiple scores in the fourth quarter, or teams that were never going to lose that game or whatever, right? And that's because they're running the ball at the end of the game, adding up rushes to that total rush count, because they're wasting clock at the end, right? It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what they do in the first half of games or when the games are being decided. They're trying to waste the end of the game away with running clock, right? So that's one aspect of this. I also think, though, that the other part of this, I said twofold, the other fold here is that RPO offenses and running quarterbacks have kind of shifted how defenses do their box counts. And frankly, has kind of left it to where they got to give something up, right? Defensive coordinators have always operated until they get down in the red zone, we're doing a bend, don't break kind of thing. No home run plays, no big plays. I remember I worked with a guy that had coached some at in Texas-born teacher and coach, Houston-born teacher and coach. He had coached some at Yale and some at Hawaii, and had kind of bounced around on some staffs, even a little bit in special teams, the 49ers. And he brought with him to our staff this idea that there was like a 3-yard window at the line of scrimmage where he was like, hey, that's the pound 'em zone. And all that is like if the ball gets in that 3-yard window, if you want to do 3 yards up and down the field till we get to the red zone, we're just going to hit the snot out of you in those 3 yards. Going to get up. I'm going to do it again the next play, right? That's what that 3-yard window was. And college defenses are kind of going to a similar mentality, right? Where like, hey, we're not going to give home runs over the top. We're not going to let your quarterback beat us with the legs around the outside of the edge. If you want to get 3 yards, 4 yards in a cloud of dust, we'll deal with it. We'll get up as long as we don't. And once we get in the red zone, we'll kind of shift up, be a little more aggressive. But for the most part, we want to make sure that you don't score on big plays. You make a mistake at some point because you're going to have to run so many plays to get this executed, right? And they're doing it with box counts and like dictating kind of what an RPO offense does. Or they're doing things like, hey, you got 4 wide outside here, so we're going to put, nickel or dime coverage guys out here and play it that way, right? At Houston with Donovan or Zion, Donovan will start this year, but I imagine you'll see Zion Christom out there in different packages because he is an electric athlete, right? At Houston, I think it'll be those kind of box count things that dictate, hey, we're going to force your hand off the zone read because we don't need an electric athlete on the outside unaccounted for, right? Or whatever. What I think is interesting, though, in watching what Barbay did at App State and Mississippi State is what I would call complex tendencies in the kinds of run schemes they're doing. By that, I mean that something Barbay did well at both places is that his running scheme appears to be dependent on who they're playing that week, right? I wouldn't call Barbay a zone guy. I wouldn't call Barbay a gap scheme guy. I wouldn't call Barbay an ISO guy or an off tackle guy. He tends to, it appears, let his opponent, the weaknesses of his opponent, I should say, dictate what scheme he's going to be comfortable running that week. The nice thing about that is the pro to that is that you're always taking advantage of something the other team does poorly every week, right? The coach in me wants to also point out that like the con to that or the negative of that is that reps spent on one thing or reps not spent on the other, right? So if this week we're doing a lot of off tackle zone and next week we're doing a lot of left side or weak side power counter, well, the reps from the one week don't always transfer as well to the week after, right? But that's, I think, more of a logistics and timing and what you spend your practice doing, how you teach it. I think that Barbay has demonstrated he's got a good feel for that. I also would point out that Nyagabi is now coaching a couple different offenses, and while I see what his offenses did well at Tulane, offensive line coach, were more of the gap scheme kind of stuff, power counter, kind of aiming at that B gap to fall out the outside kind of stuff. And again, Jenkins is great at that. I see that as a strength of Nyagavi's. For what it's worth, he has spent time in his coaching career. He's bounced around a lot before he got to Tulane, doing a bunch of different kinds of offenses. And so I think there's some mesh there. Other thing you're going to see is Houston's going to have a tight end on every play at least. By that, I mean they're going to at least have a single tight end on the field every single play of the game. No 4 wide out sets. They might split one off the ball a little bit, off the line, off the tackle side a little bit, just to kind of give some sort of a deception. But there will always be a tight end on the field. It's why Malik Carr wanted to transfer here from Michigan State. I'm sure of it, right? He's a giant tight end, hard to miss. But he'll know that there's always a tight end on the field. Why wouldn't you go to Houston right now, right? Tight ends get involved in both the run game and the pass game for Barbay. But I think it's interesting that he does a really good job of not, again, because he's varying what he's doing week to week to exploit the other team as offensive coordinator. There's not a tendency either on like, he's a really tight end dominant guy. He's a really weak side dominant guy. He's a really misdirection dominant. It's hard to pick up on what the tight end is going to tell you as a defense week to week. Excited to see what it looks like this weekend when Houston plays Houston. I guess the good thing is Houston's going to win that game right at some point. I'm excited to see what it looks like, what Parker looks like, frankly, what Zion looks like, what the offensive line look like on both sides. It's going to be a fun thing. And frankly, after last year and having the game very suddenly canceled, I think fans are just excited to have some excitement going into a new era of Houston Cougar football. I'll be breaking more down here each and every day at Locked On Cougs. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell so you know if we go live at any point this weekend. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, our Houston Cougars, every day. Go Cougs.